Alrighty, thank you everybody for joining us today for our motorcycle parking changes consultation drop-in session. Today we're going to be discussing the proposals we have for the consultation, and following that we're going to be taking questions from the attendees. So right now we're just going to start with presenting the panelists. So Gosika.
Hello, my name is Gosika Anachibi. I'm the Interim Policy and Programme Manager for Parking Services.
Thank you, Gosika. Michael Ben.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Ben. I'm the Deputy Head of Parking. I'm really looking forward to having this session with everyone. It's our first time we've run sessions of this sort, as I'm sure it is for everyone else who's online. So we're really looking forward to getting your feedback on the proposals today.
Thank you, Michael. Sarah?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sarah Slade. I'm the Project Management Apprentice for the Policy Team. And just to let you know, also in our comments section, in our chat section, we'll be joined by other team members from the Policy Team, Elliot Smith, Eloise Grimes, and Mark Collins.
Thank you, Sarah. And my name is Mariana Guerrero. I'm also from the Policy Team in the Parking and Markets Service. I'm a project support officer, and Sarah and myself will be moderating the session today, and we'll have Gosika and Michael Ben answer all your questions. We're gonna right now explain you a little bit about the housekeeping rules and the functions that the Zoom platform has, so that we know how the session will go. Over to you, Sarah.
Okay, hi everybody. So we want the session to be as interactive as possible, and we have a few ways that you can participate today. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you should have a chat function where you can chat amongst yourselves and also leave some comments. And like I said earlier, some of our policy team members will also be in that chat moderating. We also have the Q&A function. So if there's a question that you'd like us to read out to the panelists, then please put it in there. Also, you can raise your hand if you want to verbally ask the question to our panelists. And just to let you know, we won't tolerate any bad language, so please be respectful of each other, and we might have to remove anybody that's. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Oh, sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much, Sarah. We're also going to have some poll questions. Those questions are going to be related to either the consultation or just questions that are going to allow us to understand the audience that we have today. These are going to be questions that are going to pop up on your screen, and for the attendees, you would just have to answer them, and then we'll give the results immediately of the questions. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to have a presentation of the proposals for the consultation. So I'm gonna, it's going to be over to Gosika, and she's going to be explaining and having a presentation of all the proposals. Over to you, Gosika. You are muted. All right, and thank you again, everybody, for joining us. We have 9 attendees at this moment. Gosika is right now sorting out the presentation so that it could be shared with everybody on their screens. So
okay, sorry about that, everybody. The presentation should be available for everyone to see at the moment. So what I'm going to take you through is just some of the proposals that we are doing for this motorcycle consultation, and afterwards there'll be an opportunity for people to ask questions on anything they see, or any other thing that they think might be useful or they want to know the answers to. So to start, I'm going to give you an overview on the background information, the proposals, and how the proposals will affect the different groups. So in terms of the background, poor air quality contributes to an estimated of 10,000 premature deaths in London every year. As a council, we do need to do more with regards to this. You know, vehicle emissions are the primary source of air pollution in London, and it is also crucial that the council plays its part in tackling this source of pollution. You know, this is something that we've highlighted in our transport strategy and also our parking enforcement plan. We are very committed to encouraging people to travel more sustainably by increasing things like walking, cycling, and also promoting public transport.
Allow me a second, Gosika. I think that we're not able to see the presentation on the screen. So right now we're only able to see your web browser.
Okay, sorry about that.
Not a problem. Bear with us, everybody. It's also the first time that we're doing this session, so it is challenging, but we're all getting more used to it. Perfect. We can see it now. Over to you again, Gosika. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. So moving on, these proposals are aimed at encouraging motorcyclists who need to ride to switch to more zero emission motorcycles. So out of seven out of 11 other boroughs in London are already charging for motorcycle parking. So we're not the first to do this, but we are behind on this. Motorcycles have not been charged for parking in Hackney at all. That's something we've never done. And, you know, part of the reason for that is that we didn't have the right sort of technology to support us in doing that. But moving now to the present day, we do have the sort of technology that will allow us to offer some practical solutions in the form of like cashless parking. So that would be pay and display and Ringo, which you can now use on vehicles. We can also adapt to motorcycles, and also e-permits, which we're using widely now in vehicles for all our vehicle permit types. So there's also a need to provide more secure parking for motorcycles to address the security concerns. We do recognise that there are motorcycle riders that have told us that they would like more secure parking for their motorcycles. And as part of this proposal, our proposals, we are proposing this, that we would have more lockable bays across the borough to secure your motorcycles overnight near your homes. So the proposals themselves, the introduction, one of the proposals is the introduction of the requirement for all motorcycles to hold a valid parking permit, and this will mean that if you're a resident or of your business, you would need to have a parking permit that you would have to have on your motorcycle through an e-permit. Also, visitor vouchers. So if you have visitors that come to you currently and they come via bike, they would need to have a visitor voucher on their bike, but obviously we're not expecting them to put a physical voucher on there. It will be something that we would use in terms of an e-voucher to make that happen. If they don't use visitor vouchers currently, then they could also use a cashless parking session, such as the Ringo that's already in place for most of our vehicles. As I discussed earlier on, install lockable stands for motorcycles to increase security and also reduce theft. This is us listening to our residents and businesses who have told us in the past that they would prefer to have motorcycle bays that are lockable across the borough, and also to convert free solo motorcycle bays into shared use solo motorcycle bays, in which motorcycles would either need to have a permit or a cashless parking session to park in. So currently our motorcycle bays are free and any motorcycle could use it, but we're going to change that through the proposals that we're putting forward, if approved, to having a permit or a cashless parking session to be able to park in it. So if you're a motorcyclist, how will this affect you? So if you're a motorcyclist in Hackney, you would need to purchase a parking permit if you're a resident. And if not, then you'd need to go through pay and display, depending on where you park. But you will also benefit from increased security, and that is the expansion of the lockable stands that I explained earlier. If you're a resident, you'd need to park your motorcycle in Hackney through a use of an e-permit, and you're only entitled to one permit per person. Now, this limit does cover at the moment the vehicles and motorcycles. So currently, if you're a resident and you've got a vehicle of any type, so whether that be a car or a van, a small van, you will only be allowed to have one permit per person. So the proposals are saying that we would just adopt what we've already got in line. So we'll move it in line. So it will be one permit per person, depending on if you've got a car or if you've got a bike. And if you're an estate resident, our rules on estates are slightly different because of the constraints that we have with the amount of bays that we have. There's not enough bays for every single resident that lives on an estate. So the rules on residents' estates are that it's 1 per household. So you would need to have 1 permit to park per household, and that is again covering both the car and a motorcycle. And you'll also need an e-permit on that vehicle. So as Hackney businesses, we currently offer business permits, and up to 3 vehicles can be on any one business permit at any one time. So only one permit can cover 3 vehicles, but only 1 can be active at any one time. And businesses currently can have up to 5 permits. So we are proposing that this would stay the same. So it would just be a choice between a motorcycle or a vehicle. And that is the proposal. And again, if you're a visitor, you would need a valid visitor e-voucher to park in Hackney permit holder bays, and that includes resident bays, permit bays. And if you are a visitor and you haven't got a valid visitor permit, then you would need to use a pay and display session using Ringo. So if you're a commuter to the borough, you will continue to pay to park in Hackney using pay and display bays, because currently pay and display bays across the borough, you would need to pay even if you're a motorcycle to park in that. So that is not going to change. And if you want to use a solo motorcycle parking bays and shared use bays, then you would have to pay to park. We will have maximum stay restrictions applied to all day commuting. So we won't want people to come and park there all day. We want people to come and keep that bay moving so other people can get in there if they need to. Blue badge holders can apply for a companion badge. So a companion badge is similar to what we have already for the vehicle. So if you've got a vehicle, you can get a companion badge if you have a blue badge as well. So if you've got a blue badge and you've got a motorcycle, then you will be allowed to apply for a companion badge, and that will allow you to park for free in your home parking zone only. And then it's just to the questions. I'll pass it back to you, Mariana.
Thank you so much, Gosika. Lovely. So right now, I'm going to do the first poll question. This question is just to allow us to understand the audience that is joining us today. So I'm just going to launch a poll question. This is going to be a pop-up in your screen. And I'll allow you a few seconds for you to answer, and then I'll share the answers with everybody. So I'm going to be launching the poll right now. So the question is, do you ride a motorcycle in Hackney? Yes, no, or a household a household member does. So those are the options. I'll give you some more time to answer this question, and then I will be sharing the poll answers with you. Just a couple more seconds, and perfect. So let's see. Just keep getting people answering the poll. We have at this moment 45% of the attendees have answered the question. So I am going to go ahead and close the poll right now. Just like 5 more seconds. And all right, so I'm just going to be sharing the results with you. And from all the people that answered the question, all of them ride motorcycles in Hackney. All right, so right now what we're going to be doing is that we're going to start a discussion. Like Sarah explained, there's 3 ways in which you can ask questions. We have the Q&A section that is going to be at the bottom of the screen, and then you can also raise your hand if you would like to ask a question verbally, and I will unmute you so that you can ask the question. So let's see if anybody wants to start with the first question.
So feel free to add some questions anytime. If we could start with a frequently asked question that we get quite a lot. Maybe to Gosika. If your motorcycle is quite old and you're unable to find out the CO2 emissions, how will you be charged for the permit?
Yeah, so if you've got an older motorcycle and there isn't CO2 emissions attached to that vehicle, then we do have a charging structure that we're also proposing, which fits into how big the engine is. So depending on, most motorcycles will fit into the lower band because of that, but it will be looking at that instead of looking at the CO2 emissions.
Okay, thank you very much. If anybody wants any questions answered, please put them in the Q&A box or raise
Perfect.
your hand if you'd like to verbally ask.
Thank you, Sarah. So right now I have Mike. He has raised his hand. Mike, I'm going to allow you to ask your question verbally. I'm going to unmute you so you can go ahead and ask your question. All right, Mike, right now you're on mute, so you can just unmute yourself and ask the question.
Okay, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Perfect.
Right. I have a number of questions. I don't know if I'm supposed to do them all at once. The first one is, what constitutes an older bike?
All right, thank you very much, Mike. Michael Ben, would you like to answer this question, please?
Happily. Hello, Mike. Thanks for your question. So in respect of bikes and other motor vehicles, the DVLA has been typically recording on the vehicle logbook since about 2001 the CO2 emissions of any vehicle. And we, within our charging structure, always look to charge on the basis of CO2 emissions. However, for older vehicles that typically predate 2001, those details won't necessarily be held by the DVLA, and it's in those instances that our charging reverts to being based upon your bike's engine size. So I hope that helps answer your question.
Right. So, all bikes are the same up until 2001, is what you're saying?
So what I'm saying is that if on your vehicle logbook, and the information that's held by the DVLA, it holds the CO2 emissions for your bike, then our charging is based on that. And from the work that we have done looking at this, the vast majority of bikes typically fall into our lowest emissions band, which would be for residents £61 a year. But obviously for bikes which predate that and you don't have the CO2 emissions, then we link that to the engine size, which obviously for bikes is typically a lot less than other cars and vehicles on the road. So all the information on our pricing is available on our website. So you'll be able to see by looking up your your motorbike's details on the DVLA website what the cost for your bike would be.
I see. Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, that's fine. Can I ask another question? Is that all right? Yeah. Can I just confirm then, those with cars who currently have permits, that there's no additional charge then for those with cars and a motorbike? Is that correct?
That is correct, but as my colleague Oscar explained within the presentation, the proposals which are on the table, which obviously are out for consultation at the moment, set out that we would be looking to include motorbikes within the wider resident permit provision we've got in place within the borough, and that has a limit of 1 permit per person. So in instances where people have got a car and a motorbike, then obviously there will be a decision that needs to be made about which vehicle you'd like to have a permit on, and you'd need to look for alternative parking provision for the other vehicle that you don't wish to park on the street. And this is, I think, one of many areas we're really keen to get feedback from yourself and other motorcyclists within the borough in terms of what your position is, and in terms of the vehicles that you own and what sort of challenges that may present for you.
Financial challenges.
Right. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah. Well, number one is a financial challenge, as you can well imagine. I mean, the mere thought of already the high cost of the car permit, added to that another permit for the motorbike, as you can imagine, especially in today's climate. I'm really quite surprised that this is happening now, especially in today's climate where we're all struggling. There's a financial implication in this. Can I just say as well, the lockable stand, what is that? What does that mean exactly?
This is going to go over. Gosika, would you like to respond this question? And Mike, I will, after this question, I'm going to go back to other questions that we have in the Q&A, but then
Sure,
if you would like to follow up, you can also raise your hand and I will allow you to speak again.
Okay.
So Gosika, if you want to answer this, no problem. And then I will just mute you, Mike, and follow up with other questions.
Okay, Mike,
thank you.
Repeat the question for me, please.
I'm hearing the term, or I've heard the term lockable stand. I'm just trying to sort of visualize what that is. Is that some sort of, well, I don't know. I mean, fully weatherproof or an enclosure, or is it just a place where we would put our bikes and chain them up? I don't quite understand what that is.
Across the borough, currently, we do have D-locks. So those are the ones which are like a big hoop that we use for people to chain their bikes to. And we haven't actually looked into what would be suitable to have in the borough. But that's because we're consulting on it at the moment, and moving forward, if proposals were to go through, then do more detailed research into what would work and for our residents, and also from a cost perspective as well.
And then in terms of like in an estate, there are flats within estates that maybe have a sort of front yard, as it were, in front of the actual door. And if a bike is to be parked in that area, then is that considered off? Will that be considered off-road or not?
I'm going to pass this.
Just on that one, in terms of where you can and can't park a bike, obviously, if you have access to a private space that obviously belongs to your household, so a front garden typically, then obviously you're very welcome to park a bike in that space. However, in spaces such as estates where there may be grass verges or other spaces which constitute pavement parking, parking of motorbikes in the same way as parking of cars isn't permitted in those locations, and doing so does risk getting a penalty charge notice. So I don't know your particular circumstances, but if the space belongs to you and is closed off from access to the public, then you're entitled to park your bike there. But if it's a publicly accessible pavement area or grass verge, then parking isn't permitted. I hope that helps.
Thank you both. Mike, I'm going to mute you at the moment. If you have any other questions, you can raise your hand and I'll give you the option of coming back with a question. Right now, I'm just gonna pass it over to Sarah. She's going to be asking some questions that are coming up in the Q&A function. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you. We've got a question from Ben Howard in the Q&As. Out of the 7 out of 11 boroughs that currently charge for motorcycle permits in London, how many of those boroughs restrict persons to only one permit, making them choose between a car and a motorbike, as you are suggesting that Hackney may do?
Over to you, Gosika.
Yeah, so in terms of the presentation, we was talking about the people that charge for motorcycle parking across the borough, across their boroughs, so in London. With regards to the benchmarking and whether or not they do one permit per person, I'd have to go back and have a look at that and then respond to you through the Q&As later on when this is published, because I won't be able to give you that information at this point. What I will say is that from our perspective, we're not creating an additional permit, which is a motorcycle permit. We're aligning, the proposals are to align the current motorcycles into, resident parking permits. So that is one of the reasons that we're also aligning, if approved, the limits in terms of one permit per person.
Okay, thank you, Gosika. We do have another question from Julian. Can I park in my street with a permit, even if there is no motorcycle bay near my building?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I can say what we again just elaborating on what I've previously mentioned, because it's going to be a resident permit. If it's approved, it would have the same permissions as a resident permit. So you know the motorists will be able to park in resident permit bays if they've got a resident permit, or permit bay if they've got resident permit in their home boroughs.
Lovely. Thank you, Gosika. Right now, I'm going to, I have Ben. Your hand is raised. I'm going to allow you to, I'm going to unmute you so that you can ask a question verbally. You are unmuted, so perfect. Go ahead, Ben. Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I asked a question about double permits and being able to have, you know, the choice that Hackney would be asking people to make between having a motorbike versus having a car. Now, I work in the film industry, so I travel all over, as a freelancer, I travel all over the M25 at very difficult hours of the day and night, precluding the use of public transport. So I can't get to and from work, to and from different locations using public transport. It's not feasible, and it's generally not feasible for anyone in my industry. So I have a motorbike for traveling to and from work. I also have a family car, which I use obviously to drive my two young daughters and my wife around London, going outside of London, visiting, you know, for all kinds of family activities. Now, if this proposals went through, obviously then I'm being either I have to find somewhere else to park my motorbike, or you're asking me to choose between continuing to have a motorbike or continuing to keep my family car. So obviously the motorbike would go, and then what I'm left with is driving a Mercedes C-Class 3.5 litre diesel car with 5 seats in it for one person to get to and from work, and every day, as opposed to using my bike. But I've been put in that position by the council by not being able to have a permit for my car and a permit for my bike. I understand that this is, you know, all of these, the proposals are obviously intending to reduce emissions in the borough. In that instance, it's completely failing in its intent. I actually support the, you know, the fact that we should be paying to park motorcycles outside our houses. I don't have a problem with paying 60, whatever the, you know, my little 125 bike would cost me year on year. My problem is being asked to choose between the two. The result of that choice being I have to get rid of my bike because I've got a family, and therefore I'm actually worsening the emissions situation in my borough as opposed to making it better on a daily basis.
Lovely, Ben. Thank you so much. Michael, would you like to answer these questions?
Yeah, I'd like to say, I think, Ben, thank you very much for giving us an insight into your position and how these proposals could impact upon you and your family. I think this is precisely the sort of feedback that we're looking to try and get from this consultation exercise. And I think what you have described has really brought that into sharp relief. And so I really would encourage you obviously to make sure that you're taking part in the consultation both through this format and also in terms of completing the consultation questionnaire.
Yeah, I've done that, yeah.
Fantastic. Because I think, you know, these are some of the practical challenges around the proposals that are on the table for certain individuals, and we need to look closely at these difficulties and see what the best way forward is to strike the balance between, you know, a very clear commitment to reduce carbon dioxide emissions and improve air quality within the borough, which does necessitate, you know, a increasing move towards sustainable transport options, whilst also trying to strike a balance around the practicalities of the different positions that residents have got in their own personal lives. So I think that was really, really interesting, and I appreciate your input.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. The reason I was asking the question about how many other boroughs charge versus the double permit issue in other boroughs is that I've had a moped or a 125cc bike for 15 years, lived in many different boroughs in London. Most of them I've had to pay a permit alongside my car permit, but I've never been put in the position where I was made to choose and have one or the other. I've never heard of that ever.
Alrighty, Ben, thank you so much. Right now, I'm going to allow for another question. So I'm just going to remove you. And if you have another question that you would like to ask, if you can raise your hand or type it in the Q&A. All right.
Yes, thanks.
You're very welcome. Perfect. So right now we have Rafal. He wants to also ask a question verbally. So Rafal, I'm going to allow you to speak so that you can, I'm going to unmute you so that you can ask your question. You are unmuted. I think you just have to unmute yourself on your computer. Perfect. We can hear you.
Hello, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Go ahead with your question, Rafal.
I completely support the previous caller, and I think it's just not fair. I have a friend who lives just a few streets away, and he's lucky to have a driveway, so he's got a car, he's got a motorbike, so it looks like he won't have to pay for a motorbike because of the street. And I will have to pay because I have to park on the street. So how does that make sense, you know?
All right. Thank you so much, Rafal, for your insight. Kosika, would you like to answer this question or comment on Rafal's insights?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Raphael for joining the consultation and for giving us this insight. I do appreciate that with regards to other people having driveways and being able to park their cars and their bikes off-road. It does present a challenge for those that do not have that space to be able to do the same thing. The only thing we can do as a council is look at the ones that are on our streets and try and put proposals in place for those residents. We can't do anything for those that have driveways or anything like that. So, you know, thank you for giving your feedback. And if I think from our perspective, this is valuable feedback that we can take away and kind of look at and review when it's time to look at all the results and understand what the challenges are for other people who are bike riders and have these same sort of issues. So thank you.
Can I ask one more question?
Sorry, I was muted. Go ahead, Rafal. You can ask another question.
Yes, basically, well, it was a few months ago when I parked on the road just outside my house. My bike was knocked over because it was parked just within the normal area. I mean, there is no cameras around, there's nothing. I couldn't make any claim against anybody. And that happened already, twice within the time I'm living in Hackney Borough. And I have to cover the cost of the bike repairs. I saw that happening throughout the borough many times, that bikes was down on the road because someone was trying to squeeze in and obviously knock the bike down. So it just doesn't make sense. And also, if you have a parking specifically for the bikes, obviously that's not going to be on every single street. So if I have if I have a motorbike and I want to park outside my house, obviously I'm risking for that bike to be knocked down again because there is no designated space for the bikes.
Thank you so much, Rafal, for that insight. Michael, would you like to comment on Rafal's insight, please?
Yes, look, I recognise the challenge of parking motorbikes in standard residential bays, and I think I'm right in saying that in terms of what we're looking at here, as well as a commitment to look to install an increased number of secure lockable posts or other things to enable motorcyclists to be able to park their bikes with greater confidence, that we'll also be looking at whether we've got the right number of motorcycle bays across the borough. So in areas where there are high numbers of motorcyclists, and obviously we've got limited information at the moment because obviously motorcycles don't currently have to have permits. Then we can look to be more proactive in installing the right sort of bays to provide both security and also hopefully minimise the risk of those bikes being knocked over by other vehicles when they're parking up alongside. So I hope that answers that question, Rafael.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Rafael. Thank you so much, Michael. Rafael, I'm going to mute you again. I have somebody else that has raised their hand.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Also, just to whomever is raising their hand, whenever you're finished, if you could please unraise your hand so that I know that your questions have been answered and you don't have another question. So right now, I have Mike that he would like to ask another question. So Mike, I'm going to unmute you at the moment. Mike, you are unmuted if you. Perfect.
Thank you. I would just like to reinforce what what I believe his name is Ben has actually said, and now coming to the realization that, again, if I am forced into this situation where it's car or bike, then in fact the end result is actually more air pollution because I have to make that same choice, family commitments, etc., that will force me to keep the car. Whereas obviously the savings of not using the car when it is appropriate to use the bike, I'd much prefer that. And surely I'm doing my bit for the air pollution, as it were. So this is tough, really tough. I think Ben made a really valuable point there, and I can't, emphasize that enough, that if we're faced into that situation, then we could actually be going backwards rather than forwards.
Lovely.
Thanks, Mike. It'd be interesting if you're prepared to in the same way that I think Ben did when he was giving his example, to just explain the situation that you're in terms of how and when you use your bike over your family car. Would you be prepared to do that?
Yeah, of course. What now?
Yeah, if you could.
Oh, right. So I do a lot of going out and teaching. So I have to visit my students' homes. Obviously, that's lessened in this current time. So obviously, to do that, that's me going out, and therefore by bike is much easier to do so. Whereas obviously with my family, when I'm out with my family, for example, I'm obviously using the car to drive us around, whether that's shopping, etc., etc. So I hope not to be put into a situation where one has to be driving the car to students' residences, wherever it is all over London, and having to now go by car. Because to be honest with you, I spend only an X amount of time with my students, so therefore the sort of taking of London transport, etc., makes it it doesn't make sense in terms of financially. The time it takes to get to a student by London transport doesn't actually warrant the journey for the job, as it were. So yeah, that's why I had to get a bike, so that I could be more mobile, get to my students in better time, and therefore make it, my job more worthwhile. So it has a real impact. Yeah. Can I just also ask another question as well? The questionnaire I think you mentioned, Michael, I don't
Yes.
think are you sending that to us on the email? I don't think I've seen that, or if that should be filled in, that you recommended should be filled in.
Yes. So we have the consultation is open and available currently on our website. So hopefully we will be able to either share within the chat or contact all the participants directly with the details of how and where you can complete that after this session, so we can make sure we get your feedback submitted.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
But thank you for outlining your setup. Again, it's really, really helpful to get some real life examples of how people are using their vehicles to go about their lives.
And will this be fully all over Hackney? So, for example, Stoke Newington, Stamford Hill as well?
Yes. So, and the proposals would see parking permits or paid for parking through pay and display and cashless parking introduced across all of the controlled parking zones in Hackney. So that controlled parking zones currently extend up as far as Hazelnove Ward and Finsbury Park. So it's only right in the north and east of the borough, sort of Springfield and Stamford Hill, that still remain uncontrolled within Hackney.
Okay. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Mike. I'm going to mute you again, and we're going to go over to Sarah. She has a couple more questions to ask from the frequently asked questions. Over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, just if anybody's recently joined, just to let you know that if you do have a question, you don't want to say it verbally, you can put it in the Q&A box, or you can raise your hand and ask a question to our panelists verbally. I'll go to another frequently asked question. Maybe Gossika, you could answer this one. What would the impact be of these proposals on delivery drivers?
Yeah, so the impact for delivery drivers would be that they would need to have a pay and display session through Ringo for where they pick up or where they drop off, unless there's a loading bay where they can park temporarily to go inside and pick up the item. So they would be expected to pay to park.
Okay, thank you. We do have another question. Why will motorcycles be charged the same price as a car, even though they take up much less curb space?
I'm happy to answer that one if that's okay. The simple reason for that is that within Hackney, in common with many other London boroughs, we charge based on the emissions that a vehicle produces. So obviously we've got a wide range of different sizes of vehicles at present. And so we don't take into account the height, weight, or length of the vehicles that are applying for parking permits. It's entirely based upon the emissions that they produce. The reason why we do that is because we want to be incentivizing people to think carefully when they are choosing to change their vehicle, to consider moving to the greenest possible vehicle that they can, so that we can help improve air quality and reduce the CO2 emissions that are produced by Hackney residents. So I hope that answers that question for you.
Okay, thank you very much. No more questions at the moment.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So right now we have David. David, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you so that you can ask your question verbally. You are unmuted, David. I think you just have to unmute yourself in your device.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead with your question, please.
Okay, I just wanted to pick up on what Michael was saying about the emissions. Surely the emissions, if the motorcycles are able to be used in the ultra low emission zone, then they're being shown to have a low emission. I mean, clearly they're not the same as electric or a bicycle, but what the thing that gets me about, I mean, I use a motorcycle a lot, but I always bicycle around Hackney. I don't go around parking in Hackney, so it doesn't really bother me. But the idea of a motorcycle that doesn't stop, but goes down the edge of the traffic and all the rest of it, and isn't sitting queuing and making a lot of gas all the time, it seems to me that that's something that ought to be taken into account when making your mind up about how much motorcycles do actually pollute. Any thoughts on that?
Thank you so much. Michael, would you like to answer?
Happily. Thank you for your views on that, David. I think the thing I'd say on this is that one of the challenges for any authority is that we are unable to charge based on how much vehicles are used. Some people obviously may not drive their vehicle very much at all. Others may use it and travel many thousands of miles every single year because they rely upon it much more heavily. And so for us and for every other organisation that has charges linked with vehicles, the pricing has to be based on something that links in with our wider environmental objectives. And as I mentioned in my previous answer, here in Hackney, we're very clear that we want to get vehicles that are cleaner and less polluting. As I've already highlighted, I think earlier on in one of my previous answers, obviously motorbikes will very typically fall into the lowest charging band. So in effect, the charging structure we already have in place will obviously make a motorbike more attractive from a permit pricing perspective than driving a larger SUV vehicle or something similar. So I understand the point that you're raising, but in truth, the only way that we can try and find a fair and equitable way to apply variable pricing within the borough is through basing it on the vehicle emissions which are provided to us by the DVLA.
So
Sorry, David, go ahead if you have a follow-up question.
I just wanted to, so the ULEZ effect,
Yes,
isn't taken into account.
it's not. So obviously with the ULEZ, the pricing which is obviously attached to both that and also the congestion charge is a flat set fee. So obviously the price will be charged if you exceed the threshold, and there's no fee charged when you are below that. Within Hackney and other London boroughs, we are not trying to price people out of or trying to discourage people travelling in London. So we're looking to try and achieve a different end, which is not reductions in vehicle usage within central London at certain times of the day. We're looking to try and, as I said earlier, incentivise people to move towards the greenest possible vehicle that they can. And that's why we've got the charging structure in place that we do.
Lovely. Thank
Can I
you.
come back with one more? But let somebody else have a go first. Yeah.
If you want, you can just go ahead with the last question, and then I'll just let somebody else have a go, David.
Okay, I'm just having read the motorcycle news yesterday. I take note that all the dealers are saying that that people are buying small motorbikes to commute to avoid having to use public transport in the current climate. I'm not sure which boroughs. I mean, I know Westminster has a flat rate charge for parking, or did have. I don't know what it does now. Does all the other boroughs, are all the other boroughs going the same way, as it were? Do you happen to know if the other boroughs are developing charging structures similar to yourselves?
Yeah, so other London boroughs might be taking the same approach as we are, but we're not looking towards what they're doing. We're thinking about our own individual circumstance in terms of Hackney and how pollution has affected our residents and brought about poor air quality. So from our perspective, it's not what other people are doing, although we're looking to see and benchmark ourselves alongside of them. We're not sure what they're doing and when they're proposing to do motorcycle charges. I
could hardly hear you, I'm afraid. You've faded out completely, pretty much, on my microphone, on my hip speakers.
Sorry about that. I'll just speak up a little bit. I was just explaining that in terms of what we are doing, it's just looking towards what the challenges that we face in Hackney. But other London boroughs, they might take on a different approach and do something different. But we are not looking so much what they're doing. We're looking at what our circumstances are in Hackney and responding to that accordingly.
Yeah. What about the issue of the current wish of people not to use public transport because of the virus?
I think it's a really important consideration within the timings of any changes that we look to make. Obviously, in terms of these proposals, these were worked up before the outbreak of COVID-19, and we've obviously extended the consultation to provide additional time for everyone to give their views. and it's certainly something that we're very alive to as a borough. But at the same time, we also recognise that within Hackney, we've got about 7 out of 10 people don't have any vehicles whatsoever. And we're mindful that as we move, hopefully, forward towards coronavirus being much reduced within London, that we don't find ourselves in a position where we have a car-led recovery. And so quite clearly, obviously, the government guidance is to avoid public transport where we can. And at the moment, we're seeing a huge swell in demand for secure cycle storage provision to enable people to start cycling to work. Big increases in the number of people that are also walking to and from their place of work, and that's something we really want to try and facilitate as much as possible. And so that is very much what we'd like to try and achieve, but we recognise in the short term that obviously there's some real challenges and some very understandable fears from people who are travelling into work. And so the timing of the introduction of these changes will certainly take into account the picture in relation to COVID-19.
Lovely. Thank you so much, David. I'm going to go ahead and mute you. If you have another question, you can go ahead and raise your hand again. Right now, what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be raising another question on the poll function, the polling function. So this is, again, to sort of understand a little bit better our audience, or the audience that is joining us today. So the question is going to pop up on your screens. And the question is, how many vehicles do you have in your household? And this is including motorcycles. So the possible answers are 1, 2, or more than 2. Again, all of these questions and all of these sessions are for us to sort of get a better understanding of our residents, visitors, commuters situation. So we appreciate everybody and all the comments that you have, or your insights that you've shared with us. I'm just going to allow a few more seconds. We only have 44% of our participants voting at the moment, so I just want to give them a few more seconds before I end the poll. Alrighty, so I am going to end the poll now, and I am going to share the results with everybody. That should be popping up in your screens as well. So we have an 80% of the participants that answer own 2 vehicles. That would be including a motorcycle, and 20%, which is 1% participant, owns more than 2 vehicles. Thank you very much for these. This allows us to understand a little bit more the audience and everyone's situation. Again, if you want to ask another question, you can go ahead and raise your hand, and I will allow you to speak. Also, right now, I'm going to just, I have Mike again, he wants to ask a question. So just allow me a second, Mike, and I will unmute you. You are unmuted, Mike. Go ahead with your question, please.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you again. This is the first time I've ever been involved in sort of one of these consultations, because to be honest with you, I've always missed any of this sort of stuff going on around Hackney. And to be quite honest with you, I actually got lucky in the sense that for some reason an email popped up and I saw this and I was able to engage. So tell me something. How is the final decision actually made? And how many of us are actually involved in this consultation on the outside? That's us, the attendees. And obviously, as you can probably gauge from the questions that are being asked, I think it's pretty clear that we're pretty much against this idea. So what happens moving forward? I'd just like to know that out of interest. How is the end result resolved?
Right. Lovely, Mike. Thank you so much. Gosika, would you like to answer Mike's question, please?
Yeah, your question, Mike. In terms of this process, what we would do, it's not a referendum. I'd like to just point that out to start off with, but it is something where we take into consideration everyone's views, and we would weigh that up with the objections and the proposals of what we want to do in terms of our air quality objectives and things that affect the council as a whole. And from that, we would make a decision. One of the things I do want to point out is that from our perspective, it's been really important to ensure that everyone has had an opportunity to basically take part in drop-in sessions and fill out the consultation online. We've done extensive advertising in a lot of the newspapers, in our council offices until they could shut, and then on street with public notice boards. And we've also sent information to anyone that's had a vehicle with us. So if you've got a permit from a car, you would have got the email that you've referred to. And that's how we've made sure we've kept in contact with people to say that this is what we're doing. I'd also like to highlight that once the consultation's closed, one of the things that we are keen to do is have a focus group with residents, businesses and visitors to the borough to then talk them through some of the feedback that we've got, and just, you know, get some further insight as to how, you know, we're going to look at what we have and how we can move things forward. So throughout the whole process of this journey, we have, you know, tried to engage as best as we can, especially during the circumstances which we will find ourselves in. So we've tried our best to engage with everyone and ensure that everyone has an opportunity to say what they think about the proposals and give their opinions.
It's a bit of a shame that it's not a referendum, really, in this case, really, to be honest. But okay, so all right, so the decision just gets made in an office somewhere between you guys. I mean,
yeah, I just want to clarify that in terms of the decision, that we would put proposals together as policy officers and council officers that would have to go back up to cabinet to get approval. So we did a cabinet paper initially to request to consult, and that's when the consultation started and preparations for that happened. And when the consultation ends on the 10th of August, and once we've looked at all the feedback that we've received, and we've gone through everything and done the focus groups as well, which are targeted ones around, like I said, residents, visitors, and so on, we will then go back to cabinet, and the decision will be taken by cabinet as an end result. And the cabinet and the councillors who represent your interests, they're elected councillors that have been put into power by the residents of Hackney, and they will be the ones that would make the final decision.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Gosika. Mike, right now I'm going to put you on mute. I have another question coming up. I think Ben wants to ask something, and then if you have another question, I'll just unmute you again. Thank you so much. Ben, I think Ben raised his hand, but he lowered his hand. So I think that Ben also on the chat, he needs to go. Oh, right. Sorry. I'm going to allow you to talk right now. Go ahead with your question, because I know you have to leave.
Hi, thank you very much. I just, I do have to go, but I'll be interested to know how you're going to engage with motorcyclists that aren't current resident permit holders in the borough. Because I'm a resident permit for the car, so that's how I got notified. But what about people that don't currently hold a residence permit? How are you asking what they think about it?
Gosika, go ahead.
Thank you for your question, Ben. From our perspective, we've done extensive advertising, like I said, and one of the things that we made sure we did is that we put public notice boards around all of the motorcycle base that we have. So there's public notice boards that basically say this is a consultation, and to request people to give their feedback that way. We are holding these drop-in sessions. We're advertising in local news media as well as local ones in other boroughs. So we've also done some adverts in Islington Borough because they border with us. So from our perspective, it's a difficult one to get people that don't live in the borough, but It's one where we've tried our best to engage with people through where they do park, to let them know that these changes are being considered at the moment and that we would like their feedback.
I wonder if it's worth letting the you know, the main motorcycle shops, you know, that seem to be a hub for these, the training centres, you know, the places on Kingston Road, for example, Bolt Motorcycles in Stoke Newington, and making sure that they're aware to let the people in the borough that use those suppliers and services, that this is something that they can get involved and should get involved in if they have an opinion about it.
Yeah, we've actually done that. We have done proactive we've reached out to the delivery drivers, such as the big ones, so Deliveroo, Uber. You know, we've reached out to them to say, look, this, and all other stakeholders in terms of the police, you know, NHS. Like you said, some of the motorcycle companies that have shops in Hackney, we've reached out to all of them to say that this is what's going on. We've invited them to drop-in sessions and also focus groups where they can come and meet us and have a more in-depth one. So, for instance, I was talking about the focus group which we would do for businesses, which might have a different take on the proposals as to a resident. So we're mindful of all of that, and we're trying our best to communicate with everybody so everyone knows and everyone can give us their feedback.
Great. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you so much for taking part.
Thank you very much, Ben. And we'll be emailing you the answer to the question you put on the chat box. We have your email in record, so that should be fine. Thank you again. I'm going to unmute you, and I hope you have a lovely day. Perfect. So is there, I don't have anybody else raising their hand, but let's see, I don't think we have any more Q&A questions in that function. So what I'm going to do again is I'm going to raise another poll question just to have all the attendees respond another question. So I'm going to launch the poll right now, and I'll just allow a minute for everybody to respond. And the question in this poll is, have you ever been a victim of a motorcycle crime in Hackney? Yes, no, or a household member has are the possible answers to this question. Just going to allow some time for this. Probably 20 more seconds. We have half of the participants have responded. And as soon as I end this poll, I'll be sharing the answers with everybody. Alrighty, I'm going to just end the poll right now, and I'm going to share the results. So 20% of the participants, so one participant, has been a victim of a motorcycle crime in Hackney, and 75%, so 3 of the participants, have not. I would like to ask the person if you feel comfortable with sharing the experience you had via the chat box or voice, so that the idea is that we also, with these sessions, we understand the experiences that people have had, because one of the proposals that we're putting in place is to make sure that we can put in place more secure lockable bays so that any crimes related to motorcycle theft can decrease. So if you want to share again via our chat function or Q&A, or by raising your hand and talking to us, that would be lovely. All right. So David, I'm going to unmute you. Either you have a question or you want to share your experience with us. You have been unmuted, David. I think you just have to unmute yourself on your device. Lovely. Go ahead, David.
2 things. One, I'm slightly unhappy about the notion of using the term motorcycle crime, because it's not the motorcycles that commit crimes, it's the people some of the people who use them, and the hooligans are the people who commit the crime. But anyway, let's put that to one side for a bit. I understood that the Metropolitan Police have had a pretty high success rate in dealing in the last year with a lot of the moped crime that was, or people on mopeds that were committing crimes. And it's down about 40% compared to what it was. That's what I've read anyway. I just wanted to put that in the pot.
Lovely. Michael, would you like to sort of respond to David's comment, please?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we've all been keeping a close eye on the level of thefts that were taking place in London, which obviously got a lot of publicity about 12, 18 months ago, and obviously the change, I think, in particularly the police tactics and the focus they've put on trying to address it really does appear to have made significant strides, which I'm sure for everyone who's on this call is really good news. And I think in terms of what we have set out within these proposals, we are looking to try and build upon that good work and ensure that, in short, it's as difficult as possible for would-be thieves to look to try and target bikes owned or parked within the borough by the provision of really rugged points at which motorcyclists can lock their bikes up with greater confidence. I'm sure we've all seen examples of where motorcyclists have locked their bikes to any available street furniture that happens to be available, and we completely understand why that is the case. And we want to try and help improve the services that we do provide in areas where we have got high numbers of bikers. So hopefully we can help further improve the security of bikes within the borough.
Can I come back with one quick
Sorry,
thing?
yes, go ahead. I was unmuted, but I was going to ask you, David, if you had a follow-up question.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
What's the pricing going to be for leaving your motorbike on a bike park for an hour or a day? Is there going to be a pricing difference, or is it going to be like Westminster where it's £1 whether you're there for 10 minutes or the whole day?
Lovely, David, thank you so much. Michael or Gosika, would you like to comment on this question, please? Michael, you can go ahead. You're unmuted, so you can go ahead if you would like to respond.
Fine. My understanding, and I'm just looking to Gosika to confirm this, is that obviously for permit prices, the pricing will be the same as vehicles, and similarly, the pricing for pay and display, I believe, will be the same for vehicles irrespective of their size. So our pay and display or cashless parking rates within Hackney vary from around £2 an hour in the north and east of the borough to obviously areas down in the south of the borough, so Shoreditch, Hoxton, where there's extremely high demand, and where the fees are in the region of £5.50 per hour.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, David.
Lovely. David, thank you so much. I'm going to just go ahead and mute you again. Again, if anybody else has any other questions, you can go ahead and direct them to us via the Q&A, or you can just raise your hand to ask any questions. I guess that right at this moment, we don't have any other questions. So is there anything else anybody wants to add? I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. The idea of these sessions is that we can actually engage in discussion that can be fruitful and help us sort of shape our proposals as well. We don't have any other questions at the moment, so unless anybody would like to ask anything, Michael or Gosika, if you would like to add something and to share with the attendees, you can go ahead and do so right now, if you would like.
I think from my perspective, it's just to remind people that if you haven't filled out the consultation questionnaire, then you can go online and still do that. the consultation's open until the 10th of August. We will send, when we send the information from this meeting, we'll send a link to that so people can complete the questionnaire if they haven't done so already.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Michael.
And from my perspective, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you that have participated in this. For us, it's invaluable to be able to hear directly from motorcyclists within the borough who can really, as I said earlier, bring to life your own situations and the challenges that the proposals may bring up, because it's really by being able to listen directly to your feedback that we can try and refine and improve these proposals to make sure we introduce the right set of policies in place for Hackney. So I really appreciate everyone's time this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Again, we encourage you to fill out the questionnaire. Eloise and or Elliot are going to be posting right now the link to the questionnaire, and also we're going to have more drop-in sessions in the this month, as well as in August. We have one. So if you'd like to participate again, you're welcome. Please just fill out the registration form again. And if you know about any friends or family members that own motorcycles and that are interested, if you could please let them know as well that we're having these sessions, because for us it's very important, like Michael said and Gosika said, to engage with the public so that it helps us to shape our proposals. Again, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Gosika, Michael, Sarah, all the policy team for joining us today. If we don't have any other questions, I am going to be just ending this session. I hope you all have a lovely evening today. And any questions, again, that you were not able to ask here, you can direct them to our email, that is parking.policy@hackney.gov.uk. Thank you, everybody, and you have a lovely evening. Bye.